My name is Elias Thorne, and I am the solitary custodian of the Vatican's Archivum Secretum Infernum, the forbidden section. Not just forbidden in the sense of being off limits to the public or even to most clergy, forbidden in the sense that the very knowledge contained within its countless, light-devouring shelves is anathema, a contagion capable of unraveling sanity, faith, and existence itself. I am a librarian, but my duties extend far beyond cataloging and preservation. I am a jailer, a sentinel, a silent, perpetual witness to the horrors confined within these consecrated yet deeply cursed walls. And it is watching me, a profound, ancient evil whose very presence warps the reality around me, whose gaze is a constant pressure on the back of my neck, even when there is no visible source. This is not merely a job, it is a life sentence, a spiritual incarceration in a labyrinth of forbidden truths, a sentence I accepted without truly understanding its terms, a bargain struck in ignorance and desperation. Every shadow holds a deeper shadow, every silence a more profound and unsettling stillness, pregnant with unseen horrors, ready to consume the unsuspecting soul. The very air is charged with malevolence, a subtle hum beneath the surface of reality, a constant reminder of the unseen forces at play within this sacred yet utterly profane space. I am the thin line, the last bulwark between the world and a deluge of cosmic terror. I have been here for 7 years, 5 months, and 12 days. Not that the passage of time holds much meaning in this place. The Archivum exists outside the conventional ebb and flow of dawn and dusk, of seasons and years. It is a cavernous labyrinth of shadowed corridors stretching further than any sane architecture should allow, deep beneath the sacred grounds of Vatican City. The very stone of the walls feels ancient, humming with a forgotten, sinister energy. The air is always cold, thick with the dust of ages, the metallic tang of forgotten rituals, and something else. A faint, almost imperceptible scent of ozone and decay, like static electricity mixed with drying blood, a subtle miasma that clings to the very stones, a scent that seems to permeate my clothes, my skin, my very being, refusing to be scrubbed away. My only companion is the silence, a silence so profound it often rings in my ears, making my own breathing sound like a monstrous roar, a discordant interruption in the otherwise perfect, oppressive stillness. It is a silence that swallows light and sound, compressing them into a suffocating void. And of course, its presence is the true constant, a heavier, more pervasive silence that underlies all others, a silence that observes and judges, a presence that warps the very fabric of existence around me, bending light and sound to its own unseen will, making the impossible seem commonplace, the mundane utterly alien. Its gaze is a physical weight, a constant, crushing burden that never truly lifts, a silent scream in the depths of my soul. My initiation into this peculiar servitude was abrupt, almost violent in its suddenness, a rupture in the quiet, predictable tapestry of my former life. I was a scholar of dead languages, a linguist with a penchant for the obscure, plucked from the unassuming quiet of a minor theological university. My life then consisted of dusty texts, the gentle rustle of turning pages, the comforting scent of aged parchment, and the profound satisfaction of deciphering ancient puzzles. I specialized in forgotten dialects of Aramaic, obscure Canaanite scripts, and the esoteric symbols of pre-Christian Gnostic cults. I reveled in the challenge of resurrecting lost voices, of understanding the subtle nuances of beliefs long vanished, of tracing the faint lines of human thought across millennia. I found beauty in the forgotten, wisdom in the discarded. My days were filled with intellectual rigor, my nights with the quiet contemplation of linguistic complexities. One day I was poring over ancient Coptic manuscripts, attempting to reconstruct a missing fragment of a lost gospel, meticulously cross-referencing lexicon entries, my mind alive with the thrill of academic discovery. The next, I was being led down a spiraling staircase, seemingly endless, into a gloom that swallowed sound and light whole, a descent so profound it felt as though I were being excised from the world itself. The journey felt like a plunge into the very bowels of the earth, each step taking me further from the sunlight, from the comforting banality of academic life, from the warmth of human connection, and deeper into a primal darkness, a place where the air grew heavy, thick with an ancient, palpable dread. The stone steps, worn smooth by countless unseen feet, seemed to hum faintly with a suppressed energy, an echo of all those who had passed this way before, their lives extinguished, their minds broken. My predecessor, a gaunt man with eyes like burnt-out coals, their light extinguished by some unseen horror, their pupils dilated, unfocused, his skin stretched taut over sharp cheekbones, simply handed me a heavy leather-bound ledger, its cover strangely cold to the touch, a single flickering lantern, its light struggling against the encroaching blackness, and a set of instructions. His skin was parchment thin, almost translucent, his hands gnarled and trembling, his shoulders stooped as if bearing an impossible weight, the accumulated dread of centuries. He moved with a hesitant, almost fearful grace, his steps barely audible on the ancient stone, as if he feared to disturb the profound stillness. He was a ghost before he even departed, a living specter. He spoke only 11 words, etched forever into the bedrock of my memory, their timbre dry and brittle like autumn leaves, devoid of all human warmth or inflection. "Follow the rules, Elias, or it will make you wish you hadn't." The words hung in the frigid air, sharp as shards of ice, a prophecy of the torment to come. Then he was gone, retreating up the stairs, his emaciated form swallowed by the ascending gloom, leaving me in the oppressive quiet, the lantern casting dancing, skeletal shadows across walls lined with books so old their spines seemed to weep, oozing an ancient, viscous darkness. I never saw him again, nor did I ever hear another word about his fate. His departure was as silent and unsettling as his arrival had been for me, leaving behind only the echoing silence and the cold weight of his warning. I was alone, a novice guardian facing an eternity of unimaginable dread, armed only with a flickering lantern and a chilling, cryptic admonition. The silence that followed his ascent was not merely the absence of sound. It was a living, breathing entity pressing in on me from all sides, eager to claim its new occupant. His rules were not merely guidelines. They were my lifeline, my only shield against the encroaching madness, a fragile bulwark against the complete unraveling of my mind. They were not written down in the ledger, which contained only a meticulous, arcane inventory of the forbidden texts, listed in a hand far older than mine, with entries that often seemed to defy logical classification, describing contents that beggared belief. No, the rules were conveyed verbally, an oral tradition passed from one solitary guardian to the next, a whispered incantation against the encroaching darkness, a litany of survival, a desperate catechism for the soul. There were 9 of them, each more unsettling than the last, each hinting at a reality far more terrifying than I could have ever imagined, a reality that pulsed beneath the surface of the mundane world, a true cosmic horror veiled by the everyday. Each rule was a testament to the entity's pervasive influence, a grim acknowledgement of its power and its insidious methods, its subtle but relentless assault on human perception and sanity. They were the very fabric of my fragile sanity, the threads holding my mind together in this abyss, a map of dangers drawn in the blood of those who came before me. Rule number 1, never acknowledge any sound that isn't from human origin. This was the first, and perhaps the most insidious, as it demanded a constant, conscious act of self-deception, a willful denial of sensory input, a relentless war waged against my own primal instincts. The Archivum is never truly silent. There are the faint rustlings that could be vermin, mice scuttling behind the stacks, the unseen patter of tiny claws on stone, the creaks and groans of an ancient structure settling into its foundational sleep, the distant muffled echoes of the city above, distorted into something inhuman and unrecognizable, like the dying cries of a forgotten god. But there are other sounds, whispers like dry leaves skittering across stone floors when no breeze exists, a sound that promises ancient secrets, an invitation to listen, a seductive murmur that hints at forbidden knowledge, the distinct scratching of something impossibly sharp, clawing at the inside of the wooden shelves, a sound that suggests a creature desperate to escape, or perhaps to get in, a relentless, grating noise that scrapes against the very marrow of my bones. A child's giggle, high and sharp, reverberating from an empty aisle, a sound utterly out of place in this tomb of knowledge, a sound of innocent mirth twisted into something deeply sinister and mocking. A low, guttural growl that vibrates through the floorboards, a primal sound of displeasure or predatory intent, a sound that rattles my teeth and vibrates deep within my chest, awakening ancient, forgotten fears. I learned quickly that to acknowledge these sounds, even with a flicker of my eyes, a subtle tension in my shoulders, or an involuntary quickening of my breath, was to invite them closer, to give them a foothold in my reality, to give them agency, to concede their reality. My survival depended on a constant, rigid denial of the self-evident, a mental fortress against an auditory assault, a wall built from sheer willpower. My ears hear, my mind processes, the primal fear floods my system, the fight-or-flight response screams for action, but my body remains utterly, stubbornly inert, as if deaf and unfeeling, a marionette with severed strings. It is an exhausting charade, a daily battle against my own instincts, a profound act of mental discipline that taxes every fiber of my being. The temptation to investigate, to locate the source, to rationalize, to simply know, is a ceaseless torment, a gnawing question mark in the quiet darkness, an itch that can never be scratched. But I resist, for I know the price of curiosity here, a price paid in sanity and soul. The silence that follows a sound I have acknowledged, even mentally, feels heavier, charged with a predatory awareness, as if it knows I almost broke. Rule number 2. Always keep a candle lit, even with electric light. The Archivum is equipped with rudimentary electric lighting, banks of flickering fluorescent tubes that hum with an irritating, almost sickly yellow glow, casting long, distorted shadows that seem to stretch and contort independently of their source, behaving with an unsettling autonomy. But beside my main desk, a single, beeswax candle always burns. Its flame is small, frail, a defiant beacon against the all-consuming gloom, a tiny star in a universe of oppressive darkness, a fragile testament to human defiance. The electric lights can fail, and often do, sometimes with a sudden snap, sometimes with a slow, agonizing flicker, like a dying breath, plunging the vast, multi-tiered stacks into absolute darkness, a blackness so profound it feels like a physical weight, pressing down on my eyeballs, stealing all sense of depth and form. But the candle, no matter how faint, has never once extinguished itself without my direct intervention. I've seen the electric lights flicker, die, and then spring back to life, often with a violent surge, sparks crackling like mad laughter, but that small, resolute flame remains unwavering, a stoic guardian against the void. It's not for illumination, I suspect, as its meager light does little to penetrate the vast gloom, merely illuminating a small circle around my desk, a tiny island in an ocean of dread. It's for something else entirely. Perhaps it's a ward, a living ember of something pure in a place utterly corrupted, a tiny flame of defiant life against the encroaching death, a symbol of hope in an otherwise hopeless existence. Or perhaps, and this thought chills me more deeply than any other, it serves as a tether, a marker, so that when the lights inevitably fail and the shadows twist into impossible shapes that writhe just beyond the edge of perception, there is always one fixed point, one fragile flicker of light for it to observe, to focus its attention upon, a constant, easily locatable target for its unseen gaze. The thought that this small flame, which I cherish as a symbol of hope, might actually be a mechanism of my own imprisonment, an unwitting accomplice in my own surveillance, a subtle trap disguised as solace, is a dread that never truly leaves me. I tend to it meticulously, protecting its fragile existence, shielding it from imagined drafts, knowing that its demise would mean something far worse than mere darkness, something that I'm not yet prepared to confront. The scent of melting beeswax, sweet and clean, is a tiny comfort in the miasma of decay, a fleeting connection to a world untainted by this place. Rule number 3, never touch a book with bare skin if it's open to an undeciphered page. Most of the volumes in the Archivum are bound in leather, in cured human skin, in petrified wood, or even, stranger, more disturbing materials that defy earthly identification. Their surface is cold and unyielding, sometimes unnervingly soft. Many are written in languages long extinct, or in ciphers that defy human logic, their symbols twisting and shifting before the eyes like living things, playing tricks on my tired mind. I spend countless hours poring over these texts, translating fragments, attempting to piece together the fragmented, often contradictory knowledge they contain, knowing that each deciphered word is a tiny breach in the wall of ignorance, but also a potential pathway for what lies beyond, a crack in the dam holding back an ocean of terror. But occasionally a book will be open to a page where the script seems to writhe, to pulse with an inner, dark light, or where the illustrations are so utterly grotesque, so profoundly alien that my mind recoils in visceral terror, struggling to comprehend the impossible geometry or the unspeakable visages depicted creatures with too many limbs or faces that are an assemblage of screaming mouths, or landscapes that fold in on themselves in defiance of all known physics. These are the undeciphered pages, the ones that bleed meaning, not just into the air around them, but directly into the soul, bypassing the intellect, reaching for the core of one's being. My predecessor told me that touching such a page with bare skin risked more than contamination, more than a simple spiritual defilement. It risked absorption, that the knowledge wouldn't merely be read, but ingested, becoming a part of one's very being, twisting the soul into something unrecognizable, something other, something alien and monstrous. He spoke of it not as a metaphor, but as a literal, terrifying transformation, a slow, insidious corruption of the self. I've seen the gloves he left behind, thick leather gauntlets, scarred and stained with unidentifiable substances. Their surface is smooth, from countless hours of handling forbidden tomes, almost gleaming with a dark patina. I wear them always, a second skin, a barrier between my fragile humanity and the ancient malevolent truths waiting within those decaying pages. The feel of the worn leather, the faint scent of old preservative chemicals, and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet, like dried blood and iron filings, is a constant reminder of the thin veil separating me from utter spiritual corruption, a constant nagging fear that one slip, one moment of carelessness could irrevocably alter me. Rule number 4. The clock on the main desk must always read 5 minutes past midnight, regardless of real time. This rule is a constant, subtle torment, a deliberate assault on my perception of reality, a gnawing irritation that never truly subsides, a perpetual thorn in the side of my sanity. A beautifully intricate grandfather clock stands beside my desk, its brass pendulum swinging with rhythmic, almost hypnotic regularity. its polished surface reflecting the dim, sickly light of the fluorescent tubes, catching the occasional glint of my candle. Yet its hands are perpetually fixed at 12:05, frozen in an eternal, unnatural moment. I am forbidden from ever correcting it, from pushing the minute hand forward even a single degree, from enforcing the natural order of time. It's an anchor in a sea of temporal distortion, a reminder that in this place, time itself is fluid, meaningless, or perhaps even hostile, existing merely as a concept to be manipulated by forces beyond my comprehension, a plaything for it. Sometimes, when the silence is particularly heavy, when the whispers are merely a faint drone, I swear I can hear a faint, additional tick, a syncopated beat, just barely out of rhythm with the clock's steady swing, a sound that suggests another, unseen clock, ticking to a different malevolent cadence, marking moments that have no place in human understanding. It's the sound of time, not moving, a stagnant, suffocating pool where moments stretch into eternities, where the past, present, and future are indistinguishable, a featureless landscape of unending dread. Or perhaps the sound of time moving in directions I cannot comprehend, witnessed by something that exists outside its boundaries, something that laughs at human constructs of past, present, and future, something that weaves its own timeline. The constant vigilance required to maintain this illusion of timelessness, to ignore the burning need to set it right, to enforce the correct order, to simply make it work, slowly grinds at the edges of my sanity, chipping away at my grip on objective reality, on the very linearity of my own existence. It is a psychological weapon, a persistent reminder that I am no longer in control of even the most fundamental aspects of my existence, a cruel joke played by an unseen tormentor. I often find myself staring at it, my mind yearning to move its hands, to break the spell, to release the torrent of accumulated minutes and hours it has swallowed. Rule number 5. Never look directly into the reflection of the large brass mirror at the end of the main aisle, the Archivum's central aisle, a vast corridor flanked by towering shelves that reach into the unseen heights of the vaulted ceiling, their upper reaches lost in perpetual gloom, terminates at a large tarnished brass mirror. It's an ornate piece, framed with grotesque, carved figures that seem to writhe in agony, their twisted faces frozen in expressions of unimaginable torment, their limbs contorted into impossible angles, their features blurring into a silent scream that resonates deep within my soul. Most of the time, its surface is too dim to reflect anything clearly, merely absorbing the faint light, a dark, featureless expanse, a void in polished metal. But occasionally, when the electric lights surge with a sudden, unexpected burst of power, or when the candle flame dances just so, creating a momentary, focused beam, a faint reflection appears. My own figure, a distant, shadowed specter, appears in the depths of the tarnished metal. But it's never just me. There are always other shapes, indistinct, shifting at the periphery like motes of dust dancing in a sunbeam, or perhaps something larger, more malevolent, lurking just behind my ghostly image, pulling back into the depths as swiftly as it appears, like a phantom shark retreating from the light. My predecessor's final instruction regarding this mirror was stark, delivered with a desperate intensity, his voice barely a whisper. It uses reflections, Elias. It uses them to see you, to feel you, to enter you. It sees you through its own eyes, but also through yours, reflected in that unholy glass. So I keep my gaze averted, my eyes fixed firmly on the ground when I pass it, trusting only peripheral vision, a dangerous gamble, hoping that my blind spot is also its blind spot, that by denying it direct eye contact, I can somehow maintain a fragile barrier, a flickering shield against its unseen penetration, the fear of what might look back, of what might reach out, of what might emerge. is a cold knot in my stomach every time I approach that silent, shimmering portal, that window into another, more terrifying reality. The ornate frame seems to leer at me as I pass, its carved figures twisting just at the edge of my vision, whispering silent judgments. Rule number 6. If a book falls, do not pick it up immediately. Wait until dawn. This rule applies even when there is no dawn, when the concept of sunlight is merely an abstract memory, a ghost of a brighter world. If a book, without any apparent cause, without a tremor or a shift in the shelves, suddenly tumbles from a shelf, it must remain where it falls until the imaginary dawn arrives, the moment when I know, intuitively, that the world above is bathed in sunlight, a time I've learned to sense through some internal rhythm. A subtle shift in the oppressive atmosphere, a fractional lessening of the unseen weight. This happens frequently, a regular occurrence designed, I suspect, to test my discipline, to break my resolve, to tempt me into error. A sudden thud echoing through the stacks, followed by the soft flutter of pages settling, a sound that resonates with a hollow, unnatural quality, like a single heartbeat in a vast, empty chamber. It's always a book that wasn't there before, or one that was perfectly placed, secured by dozens of others, now inexplicably dislodged. Sometimes it's a volume that I recognize, one I've been studying, now lying open to a specific, unsettling page, a page that seems to glow faintly in the gloom, demanding my attention. Sometimes it's one I've never seen, its binding strange, its title an unknown symbol, a cipher of unknown origin. The covers are often damp or covered in a fine, glistening particulate matter that is definitely not dust, something that shimmers with an almost biological luminescence, like dried ectoplasm or congealed starlight, and the silence that follows the fall is always different. A pregnant, waiting stillness, a palpable tension, as if the entire Archivum is holding its breath, anticipating my reaction, watching me with 1,000 unseen eyes. I've often felt the overwhelming urge to rush, to inspect the fallen tome, to understand why it fell, to discover its hidden message, to break the profound tension with a single, impulsive act. But I resist, knowing that the books that fall are not merely falling. They are being offered, they are being presented, and the hand that places them on the floor is not human, nor is it subject to the laws of gravity or causality. To pick them up immediately would be to accept the offering, to acknowledge the unseen presence, to play its game on its terms, to fall into its carefully laid trap. I must wait, endure the silent invitation, the lingering presence, and only then, in the safety of a self-imposed temporal boundary, reclaim the fallen knowledge, handling it with the utmost caution, as if it were a venomous serpent. Rule number 7. The whispers are not for you. Do not listen. The whispers are perhaps the most constant, maddening torment, a ceaseless, insidious symphony of temptation and dread, a psychological warfare waged directly against my sanity. They are soft, like dry leaves rustling in a forgotten corner, or insects skittering across unseen surfaces, or the faint murmur of a distant crowd. Just beyond the reach of comprehension, a subliminal drone that never truly fades. They emanate from the shelves, from the spaces between the books, from the very air itself, seeming to vibrate from the ancient stones of the walls, rising from the cold flagstones beneath my feet. They are in 1,000 languages, some identifiable but obscure, others utterly alien, none of which I fully comprehend, yet their meaning is often horrifyingly clear, delivered not through words, but through pure, raw emotion, a direct injection of feeling into my mind. Promises of forbidden knowledge, whispered revelations of cosmic truths that would shatter the intellect, enticements to unimaginable power, tempting me with dominion over forces I could never hope to control, threats of excruciating, unimaginable pain, vivid images of torture flitting through my peripheral mind, and sometimes the names of loved ones long dead, twisted into mockeries of their former selves, their voices distorted into a vile parody, a cruel mockery of my deepest griefs. The temptation to listen, to decipher, to engage, to find solace or understanding, even if it is a lie, is almost unbearable, a constant gnawing hunger in my soul. My mind screams for understanding, for connection, even if that connection leads to perdition, even if it leads to the unraveling of my very soul, a desperate yearning for an end to the solitude. But I remember the fate of the previous guardian, the man with eyes like burnt-out coals, his gaze hollowed out by whatever he had witnessed, whatever he had heard. I have a suspicion that the whispers eventually consumed him, his sanity devoured, his soul flayed open, leaving behind only the husk that led me down the endless stairs, a warning etched into his withered form, a grim prophecy of my own potential future. So I steel myself. I chant meaningless incantations under my breath, fragments of old Latin hymns, verses from obscure gospels, anything to create a mental shield. I focus on the scratch of my quill on parchment, on the rhythmic pulse of my own blood in my ears, anything to drown out the insidious chorus of voices beckoning me into the abyss, into a realm of madness and despair. It is a constant battle for auditory sanity, a fight to preserve the sanctity of my inner thoughts against a relentless psychic assault, a desperate effort to maintain the last vestiges of my selfhood. Rule number 8. The entity's name is not to be spoken, even in thought. Refer to it only as it. This is the unstated, yet deeply felt core of my existence here, the foundational principle of my imprisonment, the cornerstone of my fragile sanity. I do not know its name. I do not want to know its name. To name something is to give it power, to acknowledge its dominion, to invite it into the fabric of your thoughts, to grant it a conceptual foothold in your reality, to give it an access point to your very soul. The previous librarian had only called it, with a capital I that somehow conveyed more dread than any elaborate title, any monstrous epithet, any string of blasphemous syllables. It is the reason for the Archivum, for its very existence, for the horrific knowledge contained within its lightless depths. It is the reason for the rules, for the intricate web of prohibitions that govern my every waking moment, a labyrinth of unspoken laws. It is the reason for my solitary vigil, for my unending imprisonment, for the slow, agonizing decay of my humanity. It is the ultimate captive, or perhaps I am. I do not know its form, though I have felt its presence countless times, a cold shadow in my peripheral vision, a crushing weight in the air, a silent observer that never blinks, never rests, never deviates from its scrutiny. It lives in the spaces between the books, between the words, between my breaths, a pervasive, unseen force, an inescapable omnipresence. It consumes the quiet, devours the light, and constantly, relentlessly watches me, its gaze an unseen, palpable pressure, a silent judgment that permeates every corner of my being, every thought, every emotion, every fear. The very act of conceptualizing it, even without a name, feels dangerous, like I am giving it a form in my mind, a shape for it to inhabit, an invitation to manifest. So I reduce it to a pronoun, an impersonal yet terrifying designation, hoping to deny it the intimacy of a name, the power that comes with definition, the ultimate vulnerability of being known. My routine is a monastic one, a ritual against the encroaching chaos, a carefully constructed edifice of habits designed to keep madness at bay, to tether me to a semblance of order in this realm of disorder. I wake in the small, Spartan chamber adjacent to the main archives, a cell-like room with a hard cot, a single wooden table, and a basin for washing. The air here is only marginally warmer than the rest of the Archivum, but it feels like a sanctuary, however temporary, a tiny island of relative calm. I light my candle, always the same one, a ritual I perform with a reverence usually reserved for sacred rites, as if its light were tied to my very life force, a direct extension of my will to exist, a defiant spark against the void. I walk the silent corridors, my footsteps echoing unnaturally in the vastness, each sound amplified and distorted, my breath misting in the frigid air, a visible testament to the cold, to the alien atmosphere. I check the clock on the main desk, its hands always fixed at 5 minutes past midnight, a static monument to frozen time, a mocking symbol of temporal stagnation. I inspect the shelves, noting any new fallen books, leaving them untouched until the phantom dawn, a mental marker that provides a semblance of order, a self-imposed discipline against instinct. I spend hours deciphering texts, my leather gloves a constant reminder of rule number 3, their touch a psychological buffer against the insidious knowledge, a physical and mental barrier. I translate ancient prophecies, transcribe esoteric rituals, and catalog horrors that would shatter the minds of ordinary men, my fingers growing numb from the cold, my eyes aching from the strain. And all the while the whispers are there, a ceaseless, insidious chorus, trying to pry open the defenses of my mind, promising relief, understanding, or simply oblivion, tempting me with the seductive allure of madness. And all the while, I feel it. A presence, not of flesh and blood, but of pure, distilled malice, an intelligence vast and ancient, far beyond human comprehension, a consciousness that permeates the very air I breathe, a gaze that scorches the back of my neck even when there is no discernible source of heat, a feeling of being scrutinized, analyzed, dissected, perhaps even envied for my fleeting, fragile humanity, for the warmth of my blood, the beat of my heart, the very act of my existence. Every moment is an exercise in rigid self-control, a performance for an unseen, unforgiving audience, a desperate ballet of survival in the heart of oblivion. My thoughts are not my own, or so it often feels, constantly under the cold, analytical gaze of the omnipresent entity, every flicker of doubt, every surge of fear, meticulously observed and recorded for its own unfathomable purpose. There was a night, roughly 3 years into my service, when rule number 6 was severely tested, not just by the frequency of falling books, but by the specificity of their content, a precision that hinted at a malevolent intelligence tailoring its assault. A tremor, barely perceptible, ran through the floor. Not an earthquake, I knew instinctively, the subtle vibration far too precise, too localized, too deliberate in its rhythm. Something far more malevolent, far more deliberate, a calculated ripple of unseen power. Then, a series of dull thuds, like heavy stones falling from a great height, reverberated through the main aisle, each impact sending a fresh wave of dread through me, a sickening echo in the vast, empty space. More than a dozen books had tumbled from their shelves, scattered across the ancient flagstones, like discarded toys, their bindings twisted, pages splayed. They lay open, their pages exposed, revealing glyphs that seemed to writhe and pulse with an inner, dark life, their intricate patterns shifting and reforming before my eyes, alive with an unseen energy. Illustrations of beings that defied natural law, their anatomies impossible, their expressions terrifyingly serene, their forms composed of impossible angles and non-Euclidean geometry, depicting entities that could only exist in nightmares, or perhaps in the true, unfathomable reality that lies just beyond the veil. And in one particular volume, a single, perfectly rendered charcoal drawing of a man. The man was me. My face, my hair, the distinctive cut of my librarian's coat, rendered with exquisite, haunting detail, every line, every shadow, unnervingly accurate, but his eyes were hollow. Empty sockets, devoid of any spark of life, two abyssal voids staring out from the page, and a faint, knowing smile, chilling in its implication, played on his lips, a smile of profound, ancient satisfaction. It was a macabre self-portrait, a terrifying glimpse into a potential future, a prophecy of my ultimate fate. My breath hitched in my throat, a painful, ragged gasp that violated rule number 1 in its sheer involuntariness, a betrayal of my own discipline. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird, desperate for escape, its frantic beat echoing the rising terror in my chest. The urge to pick up that book, to examine the drawing closer, to understand how it could have depicted me so accurately, to decipher the meaning behind those hollow eyes and that chilling smile, was almost overwhelming. A primal demand for answers, a desperate need for understanding. It was a direct challenge, a test of my resolve, a lure specifically tailored to my deepest fears, exploiting my innate human curiosity, my scholar's hunger for knowledge, however dark. I clenched my gloved hands, digging my fingernails into my palms until I felt the dull ache, a physical pain to ground me in reality, to distract from the psychological torment. I stared straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge the fallen books, refusing to acknowledge the grotesque image of my own hollow-eyed doppelganger, forcing my eyes to remain fixed on the innocuous stone wall ahead. I walked away, my back rigid, every fiber of my being screaming in protest, every instinct demanding I break the rule and confront the horror, but my will held firm, however fragile. The silence that followed was suffocating, thick with a palpable sense of triumph, a silent, unseen smirk that echoed through the vast space, an oppressive weight that crushed all sound. I felt its satisfaction like a cold breeze against my spine, a chilling acknowledgement of its victory, however small. I waited until my internal dawn, a subjective moment I've learned to identify not by light, but by a subtle shift in the Archivum's atmospheric pressure, a fractional lessening of the unseen weight, a brief, imperceptible softening of the surrounding malevolence, before retrieving them, one by one, with my thickest gloves, handling them as if they were venomous serpents, careful not to even glance at their open pages. The book with my image was still there, lying open, but the drawing was gone, replaced by a page of meaningless, scribbled nonsense. A childish scrawl that mocked my earlier terror, a deliberate erasure of its carefully crafted message. It had retracted its challenge, satisfied with my adherence. For now. But the image and the knowledge of its artistic ability to capture my likeness, to project my future, remained seared into my mind, a brand on my soul, a constant, chilling reminder of its pervasive power and the terrible fate it envisioned for me. Another time, the whispers grew so loud, so insistent, so terrifyingly focused that they coalesced into a single, terrifying voice. It was my mother's voice, soft and pleading, calling my name with an aching familiarity, a cadence that ripped at the deepest wounds of my memory. Elias, my son, why have you left me? Why have you abandoned your loving mother? It murmured, echoing from the darkest corner of the furthest aisle, a place where the shadows seemed to twist into particularly menacing shapes, coiling like unseen serpents. My mother had passed away when I was a child, a memory enshrined in sorrow and longing, a wound that time had never truly healed, a grief that still resonated with profound ache. Her memory was a sacred space in my mind, a fragile sanctuary, untainted by the horrors of this place. This was a violation, an invasion of my deepest grief, a desecration of her memory, a vile defilement of the most tender part of my soul. I felt tears sting my eyes, hot and sharp, a visceral pain in my chest, a profound emotional agony that threatened to overwhelm me. I wanted to run, to embrace that ghostly sound, to believe for even a moment that she was truly there, to find comfort in a mother's embrace, however spectral, however impossible. But rule number 7 screamed in my mind, a desperate internal shout. The whispers are not for you. Do not listen. My training, my discipline battled against the raw primal force of my grief, a titanic struggle within the confines of my own skull. I closed my eyes, pressing my gloved hands over my ears with such force that my skull ached, humming a dissonant, tuneless melody, a discordant drone, anything to drown out the heartbreaking pleas until my throat was raw and my lungs burned, my voice hoarse from the effort. It lasted for what felt like an eternity, the spectral voice weaving tales of abandonment and despair, accusing me of coldness, of neglect, of forgetting her, lamenting my absence, probing the very depths of my regrets, twisting every forgotten moment, every unsaid word into a weapon against my psyche. When it finally receded, leaving me trembling and emotionally exhausted, my body slick with a cold sweat, a chilling thought struck me. It wasn't just mimicking. It knew my pain, my vulnerabilities, my deepest regrets, the exact contours of my emotional landscape, every single jagged edge of my wounded soul. It was studying me, learning the precise pressure points of my soul, cataloging my sorrows to be used against me at a later, more opportune moment, a truly malevolent cartographer of the human heart. The Archivum was not just a repository of forbidden knowledge. It was a living, sentient predator, and I was its prey, my every secret a weakness to be exploited, every memory a potential weapon. My reflection in the large brass mirror at the end of the main aisle has become a source of constant, terrifying fascination, a silent, gleaming trap, a shimmering vortex of dread, despite rule number 5. I never look directly, of course. My gaze remains fixed firmly on the floor, a conscious act of avoidance, a rigid discipline. But my peripheral vision, that treacherous sliver of sight, has developed an unnerving acuity, a heightened sensitivity to the slightest shift, the most subtle distortion. I've started to notice subtle changes in the reflection as I pass, fleeting moments that linger just long enough to instill dread, to plant seeds of terror in my mind. A fleeting shadow that seemed to detach itself from my own form, expanding and contracting with an impossible fluidity, a distortion of the light that made the mirror's surface ripple like water, like disturbed mercury, a flicker of movement just beyond the edge of my field of view, something that shouldn't be there, something that retreats as soon as I try to focus on it, an ephemeral phantom. One day, as I walked past, my peripheral vision caught a glimpse of my own reflection, or what appeared to be it, but the figure in the brass was not merely standing, as I was. It was leaning in, conspiratorially, towards something just out of sight, something lurking beyond the frame of the reflection itself, its head slightly tilted, as if listening intently to a secret, its mirrored lips parted in an unholy smirk, a grin of pure, ancient malevolence. And then the faint image of a skeletal hand, long and impossibly thin, its bones gleaming dully, not with light, but with a cold, internal luminescence, reached out from the depths of the reflection, from the unseen space behind the mirrored Elias, gently touching the mirrored Elias's shoulder. It was a gesture of chilling intimacy, a silent pact, a profound violation that resonated deep within my own physical being. I gasped, a small involuntary sound, a choked breath that violated rule number 1. A tiny crack in my unwavering discipline, a betraying gasp that revealed my terror. The image vanished instantly, leaving only the dull, tarnished brass, a blank, indifferent surface, as if nothing had ever transpired. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat of terror reverberating through my skull. I hadn't made a sound. I hadn't moved a muscle, not consciously, yet the entity had reacted. It had observed my breach, however minor, however unintentional, however internal. The mirror was more than a reflective surface. It was a window, a portal into another dimension, a place where its rules of reality were paramount, where the laws of physics were merely suggestions to be broken, and whatever was behind that window was not merely watching. It was actively experimenting, probing, testing the limits of my control, assessing the integrity of my mental defenses, pushing the boundaries of what I could endure. The realization that my discipline, my adherence to the rules, my carefully constructed bulwark against chaos was merely a fascinating experiment for this nameless horror, a source of endless amusement, a captivating spectacle for its ancien bar. Charter unbearable. It saw me not as a guardian, but as a specimen, a rat in its infernal maze, a plaything for its cruel and boundless curiosity. Then came the night of the clock. Rule number 4. This incident was not merely a test. It was an overt assault, a direct challenge to the very fabric of my temporal sanity, a deliberate attempt to sever my connection to linear time and thrust me into its own distorted reality. The grandfather clock, that silent sentinel perpetually set to 5 minutes past midnight, began to chime. Not the soft, mechanical ding of a clock striking an hour, a delicate sound I had not heard from it in years, a sound of gentle, predictable time, but a deep, resonant, bell-like tone that shook the very foundations of the Archivum, a sound that seemed to emanate not from the clock itself, but from the very stones of the building, vibrating through the ancient bedrock beneath my feet. It chimed once, a sound that reverberated through my bones, filling the air with a metallic, unholy vibration, a note of pure dread that echoed in my chest. Then twice, 3 times. Each chime was more profound, more unsettling than the last, building in intensity, a slow, agonizing crescendo of terror, each strike hammering deeper into my soul. The hands of the clock remained steadfastly fixed at 12:05, a grotesque parody of their function, a silent mockery of its purpose, yet the chimes continued, an impossible dissonance between sight and sound, a direct attack on my perception of reality, an active fracturing of my mind. 4, 5, 6. Each strike seemed to peel away a layer of my sanity, unraveling the careful composure I had built over years, threatening to expose the raw, screaming nerve of my mind, leaving me utterly vulnerable. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It chimed 12 times, a full cycle, despite its hands never moving, completing a full, impossible hour in an instant, a demonstration of absolute dominion over time itself. And then, a 13th chime, a heavy, booming, impossible 13th chime that vibrated in the air long after the sound itself had faded, leaving a ghostly echo that seemed to seep into the very stones, permeating the entire structure, infusing the very molecules of the building with its dark energy. The electric lights above flickered wildly, dancing like trapped fireflies, buzzing with a desperate, dying energy, their sickly yellow glow pulsating erratically, before dying completely one by one. With sharp, final pops, plunging the Archivum into absolute darkness, a void blacker and more suffocating than any I had experienced before, a physical embodiment of oblivion. Only my small beeswax candle remained, its flame now impossibly large, flickering with an intensity that defied its size, as if fueled by unseen energies, casting monstrous, writhing shadows that pulsed and stretched on the distant shelves, dancing to an unseen, malevolent rhythm, a terrifying ballet of darkness. In the sudden, oppressive blackness, the whispers, once a distant chorus, surged, becoming a cacophony of voices, closer, more distinct, screaming directly into my mind, bypassing my ears entirely, resonating directly in the deepest caverns of my consciousness. They spoke in 1,000 tongues, a jumbled tapestry of blasphemies and unspeakable truths, a horrifying symphony of forbidden knowledge, each voice vying for dominance, each word a shard of pure terror. My hands flew to my ears, pressing hard against my skull, but it was useless. The sound was inside my skull, vibrating against my teeth, shaking my very consciousness, a relentless assault on my inner being. I could hear my name, twisted and distorted, repeated over and over, punctuated by the names of demons I had only read about in the forbidden texts, ancient, unpronounceable names that were meant to be unspoken, unheard. Names that carried an intrinsic power to corrupt and destroy, each one a hammer blow against my sanity. And then a new sound, cutting through the din, a physical, visceral horror that made my blood run cold. A wet, tearing sound, like ancient fabric ripping or flesh rending, something being peeled apart, piece by agonizing piece, a slow, sickening dissection. It came from the direction of the brass mirror, a sound of profound destruction, of reality itself being torn asunder. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my core, that something was happening there, something terrible, something that violated the physical laws of the Archivum, something that redefined the very nature of existence within this cursed space. Rule number 5 screamed in my mind. Never look directly into the reflection. But the darkness was absolute, save for my single, defiant candle, its light too weak to penetrate the profound blackness. There was no reflection to see, no surface to reflect, and yet the tearing sound persisted, growing louder, more desperate, as if something was being violently torn through the fabric of reality itself, a rending of the veil between worlds. I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck, not a draft from some unseen crack, but a distinct, icy exhalation, heavy with a scent I could only describe as ozone and despair, a miasma of primordial dread. The temperature plummeted instantaneously, a sudden, sharp drop that stole the warmth from my lungs, and I saw my own breath fogging in the frigid air, a visible manifestation of the sudden unnatural cold, a testament to the impossible conditions. A heavy, unseen presence settled behind me, pressing down, making it difficult to breathe, crushing the air from my lungs, a weight that threatened to force me to my knees. I could feel its immense weight, the palpable coldness emanating from it, a cold that seeped into my bones, chilling me to the marrow, numbing my very soul. It was here, right behind me, and it was no longer just watching. It was touching. I could feel the faint, brush-like sensation of something moving slowly, deliberately, through my hair, touching the nape of my neck, tracing the delicate curve of my spine, a sensation of icy dread that crawled along my flesh. My skin crawled, 1,000 icy needles pricking my flesh, a visceral revulsion. Every instinct screamed at me to turn, to fight, to flee, to lash out at the unseen horror, to break free from this paralyzing terror. But I remained frozen, eyes wide, fixed on the flickering candle flame, my only anchor in a world turned upside down, a world where the laws of physics and sanity had ceased to exist, replaced by an alien logic. My body was locked in a rigor mortis of fear, paralyzed by the overwhelming weight of the entity's proximity, its ancient, malevolent will, its presence a crushing vice on my very being. The whispers intensified, now focused on a single, repetitive phrase, chanted in unison by myriad voices, a mantra of despair, a chilling declaration drilling into my mind. It is here, it is here, it is here, it has come for you. The words drilled into my mind, bypassing my ears, resonating directly in the deepest caverns of my consciousness, an unholy litany of my impending doom. And then a new sensation, sharper, more focused, a direct assault on my last line of defense, a pressure on my right hand, a cold, dry touch on the back of my gloved hand, utterly alien and profoundly unsettling, devoid of any warmth or life. It was gentle at first, a curious, almost exploratory contact, a preliminary probe, then firm, as if a long, unseen finger was tracing the lines of my palm through the thick leather, mapping the delicate topography of my hand. Then slowly, with an agonizing slowness that stretched each second into an eternity, I felt the glove being pulled. Not violently, not with a sudden yank, but with a deliberate, insidious patience, a methodical unraveling of my defenses, a careful, calculated dismantling of my protection. Rule number 3 echoed in my mind, a desperate warning, a primal scream of caution. Never touch a book with bare skin if it's open to an undeciphered page. I had never broken it. Never. But the entity, it, was attempting to break it for me, bypassing my will, circumventing my defenses, actively subverting the very rules that defined my existence. It was pulling at my glove, trying to strip it from my hand, to expose my vulnerable flesh, to lay bare my humanity to its insidious touch. I resisted, clenching my fist, digging my nails into my palm, fighting against the unseen force with every ounce of my remaining strength. My arm rigid with defiance, muscles trembling, straining against the invisible tug. The pulling intensified, and I felt the material of the glove stretch, threatening to tear, the worn leather groaning under the unseen strain, each fiber screaming its protest. My entire being was focused on this struggle, this desperate battle against the removal of my meager protection, the symbolic breach of my last line of defense, a futile stand against an inevitable violation. The whispers reached a fever pitch, sounding like 1,000 starving voices screaming with anticipation, a ravenous hunger for my exposure, for the moment of my irrevocable change. My breath hitched, a desperate rattling sound in my constricted throat, my lungs burning for air. The candle flame, my beacon, my last point of reference in the profound darkness, suddenly stretched, elongating into an impossibly tall, thin pillar of light, reaching towards the unseen ceiling, a ghostly finger pointing to some unknown horror, then snapped back, flickering wildly as if struggling against an invisible wind. A sudden, violent convulsion. When it returned to its normal size, smaller now, diminished, a faint, almost invisible wisp of smoke curled upwards from its wick, a delicate serpentine ribbon dissolving into the cold air, a fragile ghost of light. And then a sound. A new sound, one I had never heard before in the Archivum, a sound that burrowed directly into the deepest, most primal parts of my brain, bypassing all conscious thought, striking at the very core of my animal fear. It was a soft, guttural purr, emanating from directly behind me, so close I felt the vibration against my scalp, a low, resonant rumble that spoke of deep, ancient satisfaction. A profound, chilling contentment. It was a sound of absolute contentment, of profound anticipation, of utter, unfathomable hunger. It was the sound of a predator about to feast, a sound that echoed the silent, predatory grin I had seen in my own reflected image. The pulling on my glove ceased. The frigid presence behind me receded, but only slightly, like a tide pulling back only to gather strength for its next assault, a temporary reprieve before the inevitable deluge. The whispers faded, not entirely, but to their usual background hum, a low, insidious drone that seemed almost comforting after the recent cacophony, a return to the normal level of constant torment. The tearing sound from the mirror's direction also ceased, replaced by a deep, resonant silence that felt heavier, more substantial than before, a silence that hummed with a newfound malevolent energy. Slowly, tentatively, the electric lights flickered back to life, humming sickly as usual, their yellow glow illuminating the familiar, horrific expanse of the Archivum, revealing the shelves laden with untold terrors. Everything, outwardly, seemed to have returned to its normal state of oppressive quiet. But something was different. I knew it, deep in my bones, a certainty that bypassed rational thought, a primal understanding that permeated my very being. My right hand, still encased in its glove, felt strangely heavy, as if infused with lead, an unnatural density. A dull, throbbing ache pulsed in my palm, a steady, rhythmic beat beneath the leather, not a pain of injury, but a pain of profound, fundamental change. I carefully, painstakingly removed the glove, my movement slow and deliberate, as if diffusing a volatile device, each motion fraught with peril. My bare hand felt alien, exposed, vulnerable, almost translucent in the dim light, its skin tingling with an unseen energy. I turned my palm upwards, bracing myself for whatever horror awaited me, my eyes wide with morbid curiosity and profound dread, my breath held captive in my throat. There was nothing outwardly visible, no wound, no mark, no grotesque symbol burned into my skin, no overt signs of physical alteration, no searing scar or festering lesion. But the lines of my palm, the intricate creases and folds, seemed different, deeper, more pronounced, and within the lines a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer, like fine, iridescent dust caught in the light, a gentle ethereal glow, pulsating with a soft internal luminescence. I brought my hand closer to the candle flame, examining it with a morbid fascination. My breath held. The light caught the shimmer, revealing minute, shifting patterns within the lines, like tiny glowing sigils slowly forming and reforming. Utterly alien, yet strangely beautiful, intricate beyond human comprehension, moving with a silent, unseen logic. It was beautiful, in a terrifying, unholy way, a masterpiece of unseen, unholy artistry, a living, breathing inscription on my very flesh. And as I stared, mesmerized by the silent dance of light, I realized the knowledge from an undeciphered page had not merely been touched, it had been transferred, ingested, not by a book, but by something far more profound, far more ancient, far more insidious. It had reached inside the book, touched the page, and then, using its cold, unseen finger, it had traced the symbols of that forbidden knowledge directly onto my flesh, through the barrier of the glove, bypassing all my carefully constructed defenses. It had marked me, imprinted me, made me a living, breathing receptacle for the very things I was sworn to contain. The barrier was not merely breached, it was dissolved, transmuted, rendered irrelevant. I was no longer merely a guardian of the knowledge, I was a part of it, an unwilling extension of its malevolent will. My predecessor's final warning echoed in my mind, not just the 11 words, but the look in his eyes. Those burnt-out coals, their light long extinguished, now seemed to me not a sign of fear, but of profound, terrible understanding, a horrifying enlightenment. He had been a sentinel, a jailer, but perhaps, by the end, he had also become a vessel, a living conduit for the Archivum's malevolence, a walking, breathing library of its unspeakable truths. He had not merely guarded the knowledge, he had become infused with it, a walking, breathing testament to its insidious power, his very being warped and transformed by its influence. I looked down at my hand, at the faint, shimmering patterns that pulsed with a slow, internal light, a new heartbeat beneath my skin, resonating with a sinister energy. I closed my fingers into a fist, feeling the strange, new power thrumming beneath my skin, a subtle vibration that resonated with the very stones of the Archivum, with the silent hum of the forbidden texts. It was not painful, not overtly harmful, not yet, but it was there, a part of me now, a piece of the forbidden section, lodged in my very being, intertwined with my flesh and soul, a parasitic symbiosis, a piece of it. The transformation had begun, a terrifying evolution into something I could barely comprehend, a merging of the human and the monstrous, a slow, inevitable metamorphosis into an unholy thing. Rule number 9 was never explicitly given to me. I suspect it's the one that can never be spoken, never truly understood until it manifests itself, until its chilling truth becomes undeniable, an inescapable reality. Perhaps rule number 9 is simply this: you become a part of the Archivum. You become a part of what you guard. You become a part of it. My role is no longer merely to contain the horrors. It is to embody them, to become the very vessel of their malevolence. The slow decay of my humanity, the gradual assimilation into the very essence of this cursed place, has commenced. I am the only librarian in the Vatican's forbidden section, and it is watching me. Yes, its gaze a constant, searing presence, a palpable weight on my soul. But I realize now, with a chilling clarity that drains the last vestiges of warmth from my soul, that it is also inside me. Its essence flows through my veins, its cold knowledge etched into my very being, its ancient, alien consciousness beginning to meld with my own. And in the oppressive, eternal gloom of the Archivum Secretum Infernum, there is no escape, only perpetual vigilance, a never-ending battle to maintain some semblance of my former self, a desperate, futile struggle against the encroaching darkness, and the slow, inevitable transformation into something that can truly comprehend the infinite horrors contained within these walls, something that can survive them, something that can become them. My transformation has begun, and with it, a new, terrifying chapter in my unending vigil. My very perception of reality is shifting, the mundane edges of the world dissolving, revealing the impossible geometries and cosmic horrors that lie just beneath the surface, always there, always waiting. I see not just with my physical eyes, but with an inner vision, a nascent awareness granted by the marking, a perception that pierces the veil of normal existence, granting glimpses of truth that are both sublime and utterly annihilating. The very act of reading the forbidden text is no longer an intellectual exercise. It is a communion, a direct download of ancient, monstrous wisdom into the depths of my imprinted mind. And now, when I pass the brass mirror and catch a glimpse of my reflection in my peripheral vision, I no longer see just myself, the weary, haunted Elias Thorne. I see two sets of eyes. One, my own, haunted and weary, still clinging to a desperate hope for humanity, a flicker of fading defiance. The other, impossibly ancient, glowing with a faint, malevolent satisfaction from within the depths of my own reflected gaze. An unspoken promise of the horrors yet to come. A chilling sign of what I am destined to become. A grim premonition of my final, monstrous form. I am the Archivum, and the Archivum is me. My prison has become my skin, and the jailer has become the monster he was sworn to contain. The silence is no longer merely oppressive. It is pregnant with the whispers of my own burgeoning, unholy knowledge, a knowledge that thrums with a dark, terrifying power, a symphony of damnation echoing within my very skull. I am no longer just Elias Thorne. I am a gate, a threshold, a vessel, and it watches, from within and without, content in its patient, eternal triumph, its insidious victory complete. My predecessors' burnt-out eyes were not just a result of witnessing horror. They were the windows to a soul that had already transcended its humanity, a soul that had begun to perceive the universe through the eyes of the Archivum itself, a vision both divine and demonic. I am slowly but surely walking the same path, each day a step further into the abyss, each moment a surrender of myself to the infinite, malevolent knowledge I am bound to. The horror isn't just in the books or in it, but now, irrevocably, in me, a silent, festering seed of cosmic dread blooming in the garden of my